Hi, welcome to Next Day Politics. My name is Jack, and I'm really lucky today to be joined by Steve Barclay for an interview today. Hey, Steve.
Good to join you.
Yeah, you okay?
Very well, thank you.
Very good. So I wanted to talk first, before we get into any serious questions, really about how you got into Parliament, and how did you start? How did you get into becoming an MP, and then how did you go and do that?
Well, I got involved with my local party at the time, largely volunteering and picking up things that perhaps some of the more experienced people weren't as keen to do, and just getting out and campaigning. And so I got involved that way, stood for the local council in a seat which wasn't particularly favourable, and really sort of got some experience, and it grew from there. And then I stood for Parliament again in a seat which was not favourable to the party, but it was an opportunity to gain experience, and did that a couple of times before I was then selected as a candidate here and subsequently elected.
Why the Conservative Party as well? Why did you pick that party?
First and foremost, because I believe in a meritocracy. I think it should be about trusting individuals, of freedom, of liberty, not the state dictating to people. And I think the Conservative Party offers that ladder, that people who work hard succeed. That's the Conservative sort of belief in the individual and giving people opportunity, rather than the state saying it knows best and trying to dictate to people. So that really was what shaped my Conservative philosophy.
Okay, and so you've had quite a few cabinet positions as well since you've joined Parliament. Yeah, I see you're smiling there. You've been a whip, you've been Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Minister of State for Health, Brexit Secretary, and now Chief Secretary to the Treasury. What's been your favourite cabinet position that you've served to date?
Well, they're all really interesting in very different ways. It means that being a government whip's about getting legislation through Parliament and supporting colleagues. And so you have a lot of time with your colleagues, and a lot of time in the chamber of the House of Commons. So I enjoyed that. I mean, I could go through them all. They all have their different things. I think the current role as Chief Secretary overseeing spending is very interesting because it covers all departments. And so you get to interact with all aspects of government. So that makes it very interesting.
I'd like to focus on a bit for your one specific role. So when you're a Brexit Secretary, which for me is how I know you best. As you probably know, Brexit isn't very popular or not the most popular among young people.
It is in Chatteris.
75% of 18 to 24-year-olds nationally who voted in 2016 voted for Remain. Why do you think Brexit was so unpopular for young people?
Well, I mean, you live in Chatteris, so you know that in Chatteris, actually, Brexit was hugely popular. The vast majority of people in Chatteris, as indeed in Finland as a whole, voted for Brexit. So you'll have a good idea from your own neighbours and friends, many of whom will, I'm sure, have voted for Brexit. I think, again, I think some people felt their voice hadn't been heard. They felt their policies had been followed, which hadn't been what they had voted for over a number of years. And I think it was a vote of confidence in the United Kingdom that as a major economy, as a member of the United Nations Security Council, as an outward-looking country, that we're confident in our sovereignty and the opportunities that a more bespoke approach would offer. And we're still part of Europe. We still want to have very good relationships with our European colleagues, but there was a desire, I think, not to be bound by rules set by others that people in Chatteris and elsewhere were not able to elect. And I think it was a vote of confidence in the UK, and that's why many people in Chatteris voted for it.
I mean, but we're talking nationally, there are young people all across the country who maybe didn't buy into that. And why do you think they didn't buy into the Brexit arguments?
Well, I mean, to some extent, you might have to ask them, and I think we're looking forward rather than going back over the Brexit debate. I think we debated that all at length. I certainly did over many years. I think most people accept now that the country, not just in the referendum, but at the subsequent 2017 election, and indeed in 2019, where a key part of the election was to get Brexit done, that is what the country as a whole voted for. So I think the main thing we can, by all means, run through the Brexit arguments. I've done that many times. You've probably got many clips from me that would cover the same ground. But I think the main issue really is to look forward, bring our country together, and be very outward looking.
And now moving on to your position as Chief Secretary to the Treasury, I think you can agree that preparing for the future is crucial for young people and knowing that they have jobs in the future. I'm sure it doesn't surprise you that a lot of the the jobs that people are thinking that will be in the future are green jobs and jobs in green energy. So what have you been doing as Chief Secretary to make sure there are those green jobs for young people when they are able to go into work?
Well, we're making significant investment. You'll have seen the Prime Minister's 10-point plan, 12 billion of spend, 250,000 jobs, but also about leveraging in private investment into many of those areas, former industrial areas, such as Teesside, where many of those sort of jobs have been lost in recent years. So real opportunity in areas such as expanding our offshore wind capacity, carbon capture and storage, looking at green finance, so that our financial services industry, 2/3 of jobs in financial services, people tend to think of it as the City of London, 2/3 are actually outside London, so thinking about green finance as well. So there's a whole range of opportunities within the green economy that we're supporting, and you've got significant investment from the Treasury, from the Chancellor, supporting the Prime Minister's 10-point plan, and you see that in the progress we're making against our carbon budgets.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So, sticking on, future jobs. 85% of the jobs that will be available in 2030 do not exist at the moment, according to Dell. A lot of them will be using computers, or people need to be computer literate to be able to use them. And there were concerns during home learning that young people did not have a computer to use. And so, how are you going to guarantee that young people, or the majority of young people, will be computer literate when they want to go into work?
Well, obviously, from a Treasury point of view, firstly, we signed off the funding for laptops for schools, and we had a significant expansion of that through the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. We have a big programme in terms of rolling out faster connectivity, particularly for areas such as ours in the Fens, so that people can work from home more easily, but public services can also better access that data, things like telemedicine. So, for example, instead of having to travel from Chatteris to Hinchinbrook or Addenbrooks, you'd be able to access more services online. Looking at our skills and apprenticeships, so we've increased the funding for that, tripled the number of traineeships. We've got schemes like the Kickstart, £2 billion of investment going in there. Another programme for the long-term unemployed, Restart. So a real focus through our plan for jobs on supporting people who are out of work back into jobs, but also then giving them the opportunity to progressing their career through T-levels, apprenticeships, upskilling, which is really what's at the heart of our Levelling Up agenda. And sometimes people say to me, well, what exactly is the Levelling Up agenda about? Well, first and foremost, it's around human capital, skills, getting that investment into training through things like apprenticeships, and there's been a significant investment there. And then you mentioned schools specifically. Within the schools budget, not only have we had the COVID recovery funding, the 1.7 billion and the 1.4 billion combined, but also the core funding for schools has increased an extra 2.2 billion this year. So significant investment. So when you say what have I done, what has the Chancellor done, we've invested very significantly in this area, both whether it's in schools, whether it's in programmes through DCMS, in connectivity, or whether it's more widely in skills in the labour market.
I'd like to focus more on the schools that you said there, schools investment, so the core funding has gone up. But there was a 50% spending cut by the government on courses about music, drama, media studies, dance, all, arts-based subjects, and that may leave young people not being able to pursue their passions because all their departments are underfunded and the courses are underfunded. In light of this, what are you going to do to help make up for the cuts and help young people who want to have a career in arts be able to fulfil their passions?
Well, I don't accept that. Firstly, there's been very significant investment in universities. In fact, the previous coalition government was criticised around tuition fees, which to a large extent gave the universities much more significant funding at a time when other departments were facing financial pressures. Likewise, if you look at university funding, around 85% of students don't pay back their full student loans at the moment. There's around an £8 billion cost to the Exchequer from that. So each year. So significant funding has gone into universities. Alongside that, if you look at other university funding, for example, on the research and development, we've got a commitment to significantly increase our research and development. That relates to your earlier question on green jobs. What are the jobs of the future? You mentioned the Dell statistic, how many people's jobs will change. What's key there is we get investment into high quality jobs, into the jobs of the future, and that's where that research and development funding is key. And then in areas such as arts and sports, if you look at the schools' sports premium and arts premium, particularly for example in primary schools, there has been additional investment in schools in the non-core schools budget there. So there has been investment both at the university level, at the primary school level and the schools level, but also into the wider economy. And finally, when you mention arts and culture, I just think of our own constituency through the Cultural Recovery Fund, the Angles Theatre, the Light Cinema. They've all received funding as part of our COVID package. So this is a government that has invested in supporting our arts and cultural sector through the Cultural Recovery Fund to help them weather the storm of COVID.
Going more kind of locally and what you do locally as an MP, the Fens hasn't always been known as being the most prosperous area in terms of jobs and young people, but we're so close to Cambridge that we might be able to see some investment. What do you think you can do, or what do you think can be done to encourage more development in the area, which can enable young people to find employment that aren't necessarily in agriculture?
Yep, so if I just take today, I've just come from an investment at March Station, an upgrade to the station there, talking to the train operating company and the other rail executives about better connectivity. I know for people in Chatteris and March, and for myself living locally, I find it frustrating that the last train out of Cambridge is 8:30, and that means we can't have a night out in Cambridge. There isn't that connection to whatever the cultural offer is in Cambridge and more widely. So part of it's looking at our transport links, and where we're investing. Just a short distance from here, the Guy Hearn roundabout, £14 million of investment. If you then turn left, go a little further down, you've got the investment at King's Dyke on the crossing there, putting in the new bridge. So whether it's March Station, whether it's Guy Hearn, whether it's in Whittlesea, you can see investment in Fenland, which I have played a key role in securing, improving our transport connectivity. Because whether people are travelling to Cambridge, whether they're travelling to Peterborough or elsewhere, that is absolutely core to the prosperity of the area.
Barclay, the Fenland and East County Advisory Board, don't know whether you know about them and their existence, they've been doing a big push on food poverty within the past year. Consultation from the YAB shows that 70% of young people within Fenland have food worries, whether that's about themselves, about their families, or about their friends being able to eat properly. One of the biggest issues raised at their recent food poverty conference was that while food poverty is a big concern for young people in Finland, it's not something that's really taken into account by the council, or we're not seen as in cities like Liverpool, Manchester, that we're very much a hidden area in terms of there may be deprivation, but you can't really see it, and there's not really enough support in there to help it. What do you think you can do as a local MP of Finland to give young people in the area more food security?
Well, I think first one's got to look at the challenge on food security within the wider context of cost of living, because actually if you look historically, the cost of food compared to previous decades is lower now than in previous decades. Quite often what is driving food insecurity is other household costs, such as the cost of housing. So often whilst people talk about food security specifically, and as a government we have been doing things through our funding of schools during the COVID crisis, our funding in terms of local authorities. We're giving local authorities additional funding again to support families as well. We've had various things such as the uplift in universal credit, the extra £20 to help families during this period. We removed the minimum income floor for those on universal credit. We adjusted the housing allowance to the 30th quartile. So we've had a package of measures to help. But what I would suggest is it's not purely about food. Food and the affordability of food is within the wider context of people's household bills. And so it's about looking at what the challenges on food, but also what is the wider household bills challenge that people face. And that requires a range of things to be done, whether that's on housing, whether it's on other costs such as utility bills and so forth. You say, what have I done specifically? If I take the homeless within the Treasury, I'm obviously very involved as a Minister for Spending. We've increased our spending on the homeless, I think, by 230% over the last couple of years. There's been a very big increase in spending to address that. That was the sort of issue a couple of years ago that many younger people were raising as a concern with me. We've had the Everyone In campaign as a part of our response to COVID. So the Conservative government has really supported a programme of action to tackle homelessness with more work to do, particularly around the wraparound services, around, for example, addiction, mental health, some of the other things that often sit alongside homelessness. So a bit like the challenge on food, the challenge on homelessness, often these have a number of issues within the item that is talked about. And so we're taking action, we're funding a range of measures, but we're also looking at it across the board, not in a very narrow way.
And our final question, I'm sure you know, thank you for your time first, before I ask this. I want to focus on your Read to Succeed campaign, which you did obviously with young people across Finland. Why did you pick Year 4 children specifically to get a free book?
Yeah, so the Read to Succeed came out of a visit to one of the primary schools, and the head teacher there told me about a challenge she was facing, which was some children didn't have books in the home and were really falling behind during the summer holidays, and I wanted to use my convening power as a Member of Parliament, obviously to reach out to businesses, to councillors, to residents, and to mobilise the community. I think that's part of my role as a Member of Parliament. So we've raised, I think, over 10,000 books, and the reason we chose Year 4, well, firstly, that was the advice the educational experts who know more about it than me suggested. So it wasn't that I picked a year. I spoke to them and said, which year do you think has most impact? And the reason for that is they said that's the year at which people really start to read independently. So that's the age group where most children start to read independently. And so that's why we picked that year. Now, when I grew up, I loved reading. Well, I still do love reading, but I used to read a lot. And I have 2 young children who I would read to, as my wife would. So it really sort of hit home when I heard about local children where they weren't having that opportunity. I thought as a community we should come together and have a literacy campaign. But I also then wanted to do more than simply offer a book and try and generate some excitement for reading. I also wanted to make the most of some of the other things that were out there, and our local libraries had great summer reading courses, but often I found people didn't really know about them. And some of the children we were trying to reach might not be the ones whose parents or carers would have taken them to the library. So what we did was we used the book as a hook to encourage as many of our school children to take part in our local library reading challenges. We arranged some prizes. A class gets to go for a free cinema viewing, another class gets to go for a free swim at the local swimming leisure centre. So we arranged that, and part of it is to encourage the love of reading, but part of it is to use it as a hook, as an encouragement to get into our local libraries where we've got some fantastic staff and really make the most of those opportunities that were there, but perhaps weren't as known about as they should have been.
That's the end of the interview. Thank you
Pleasure.
very much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, well,
nothing
just
else.
Great to see you, and great to have an opportunity to chat with you.